All right, welcome to this tutorial of the JuryLens software program. JuryLens was developed to help trial teams maximize their efficiency and effectiveness when tracking information about potential jurors in the courtroom during the jury selection process. And so in this video, I want to walk you through the JuryLens program itself and show you how to use it. As you can see over here on the right, we have a built-in tutorial. You can certainly turn it off by clicking End Tutorial, and on any screen there's an option to pull the tutorial back up to help you throughout the process. Now fundamentally there are two basic parts to this program. The first part is the part of the program where I'm going to create my jury selection strategy in advance of trial. So it's where I enter all the questions that I want to ask. If there's a juror questionnaire, I enter the questions from the juror questionnaire. So basically I create my program that's then going to track the data that I'm collecting in the courtroom. The second part of the program is the courtroom screen. That's a separate screen, that's a separate part of this program, which is after you've created your template and you've added all the questions that you want to ask. This is the screen that you go to on the day of jury selection to actually enter your juror data. And what you'll see is the screen for creating your questions, creating your template, looks very different than the screen for actually tracking that data on the day of jury selection in the courtroom. This is the first time I'm using it, so I'm going to click Create New Trial. Now, when you click Create New Trial, at the top you'll want to enter your trial name, so I'm just going to call this Smith v. Acme. This is just how it gets stored in the program. And then I'm just going to go down and look at all my options. So I'm going to be asked to enter the total jurors in the pool. And there's a warning right below this that says cannot be changed, add sufficient extra jurors to account for potential additions. So here's what I'm doing here. I am entering the number of veneer members that I expect the judge to bring in, and I'm going to add a little cushion. So if the judge has said that there are going to be 60 jurors in this veneer, I'll probably enter, just to be safe, I'll enter 75. And the reason I'm entering 75 is once you're in the program, you can't add new seats. So if you've ever been in the situation where you went through your veneer and didn't have enough jurors and the judge had to call up more, that's what this is really trying to account for. So I'm adding a little cushion to account for the possibility that the judge is going to add more. So I'm entering 75. And then it's going to ask you to enter the total jurors in the box. So how many people are going to sit on this jury? As you see right here, it says seated jurors plus alternates. So if this is a civil case in a state court where there's 12 jurors, and let's say it's a multi-week trial, 3 or 4 week trial, so the judge has said there will be 3 alternates. I have 12 seated jurors and I have 3 alternates, so I want to enter 15 in this box. And then the next thing I want to enter is it asks me for total peremptory strikes. Ideally, you should know this in advance. You can certainly change it once you get into the program, but let's say we're using a typical number of peremptory strikes in a state civil case. So let's say we have 4 total strikes per side. So the plaintiff gets 4 strikes and the defense gets 4 strikes. I want to add those together. So 4 plus 4 gives me 8, and that's what I want to enter in this box. Now, the reason it asks for this information about total peremptory strikes and total jurors in the box is this program's going to track and keep you constantly aware of who is in the box if everybody uses their strike. So it's basically who is in play and who's not in play. And as jurors are struck for, for example, cause or hardship, the program will constantly adjust so that you always know who's in play if there are no more removals and all that's left is for each side to exercise their peremptory strikes. And then you can also indicate which seats in the box are going to be your alternate seat numbers. You don't always know this as you go through the jury selection process, but there are certainly some cases where the judges, for example, randomly select the alternate juror seat numbers in advance. And so if we know that, we can enter that into this program, and visually it will always show us where those alternate seats are. So let's say this is a state court trial where the judge decides to pick the alternate seats in advance. They pull before any of the jurors are brought in, any of the venire members are brought up, the judge pulls, let's say, 3 numbers out of the hat. And let's say the first one is seat 3. So I enter 3 there, and I click add seat. The second number, let's say, is 8. So I click 8, and I add the seat. And then the final number is 12. So I enter 12, and I add the seat. And so you can see I've added my 3 alternate seats. If you accidentally enter the wrong number, you just click on the X, and it'll remove it. And then you can add whatever the number is. Let's say I put 12, and it turns out it was actually 13 that the judge pulled. So change it to 13, click add seat, and there we go. The next option down is what's labeled as use juror response scores. And this is what this is asking. The program, as you'll see in just a couple minutes, allows you to assign points to the answers on the different questions that you want to ask the jurors. So for example, if I wanted to ask, have you ever been a plaintiff in a lawsuit? And I want to assign points for anybody who says yes. I have that option to do that. Some trial teams, some jury consultants like to use scoring systems to help them evaluate the jurors in the venire. And that's what this is. It allows you to create scoring. So if you want to do that, and I'm going to do that for this tutorial, you just check that box. If you're not going to use it, you uncheck the box like that. But we're going to use it, so we're checking the box. And then the final option is start with default juror question list, or start with juror question list from another trial. This is the first time we've used it, so we are going to start with default juror question list because we don't have a pre-existing one. I would select this if, let's say, I am civil attorney who pretty much only tries asbestos cases. And I've tried several asbestos cases, and I know I use the same jury selection strategy every time. So I know what the questions I'm going to ask are. If that's the case, what you can do is if you've used the program before, you can select this, click the drop-down box, and find a previous trial. And what it will do is it will just pull the questions that you created for that trial. It won't pull the juror data from that trial, just the questions, and you can import it here so you don't have to constantly reinvent the wheel if you're trying a lot of the same cases. But this is our first time using it, so I'm going to select default, start with default juror question list. So I've selected all my options here, so now I want to save trial and continue. Now, are you sure you want to save this trial? I'm going to click OK, and it's going to configure. So now the screen it's taken me to is the screen where I'm going to create questions that I want to ask the jurors. And again, it brings up the tutorial. I don't need the tutorial, so I'm going to turn that off. But if at some point I don't understand something and want the tutorial, you just come up here, click tutorial, and it'll bring it right back to you. When it brings me to the screen, these are the questions that pertain to the information, the data that I'm going to collect about your jurors. There are built-in template questions that are going to be on there anytime you pull it up. And they're mostly demographic and just some standard questions that we see in a lot of trials. So, first name, last name, age, gender, race, appearance. That's just, you can enter some comments about what they looked like, what type of community they live in, do you rent or own, education level, education major. So those are some pretty standard questions. And there's a few other on the second page: employment status, employer, job, employment history, served in the military, marital status, information about children, have you ever served on a jury before, political information, and what are your hobbies or interests. So those are pretty standard questions that will automatically be loaded when you start a new trial and a new template of questions. They will preload, but you're not stuck with these questions. So for example, let's say you don't care what type of community they live in. What you do is you just come over, hit the trash can, confirm that you want to do that, and it will remove that question and automatically adjust. There's a few other options before I showed how to add new questions. What you can do is, as you can see, these questions they are numbered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those numbers affect the way that they'll appear on their screen. you can change those numbers. So if, let's say, I'm using a questionnaire and gender is the first question after name. So I want I want to move it up ahead of age. All I do is I click these arrows over here. I click on these and I just hold it down and I drag it up. Now I've dragged it too far. I've dragged it above last name. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to drag it below last name. And you see it automatically adjusts the numbers. So I can move the questions around, recreate the order, however it works best for me. So I have my basic template that I've started with. Now I want to add questions. I'm just going to go ahead and go to page 2 because this is where they'll get added. What I do to add a question is I go up and I click Add Question. What type of question? So text. Is it a scale, like strongly agree, somewhat agree, so on? Is it a numeric scale, like a Likert scale from 1 to 10? Variety of options here. I'm gonna do yes, no, because this is going to be my question that I want to answer, that I want to ask. Have you ever been a plaintiff in a lawsuit? So I enter the question. And then it says scoring category. As I mentioned before, you can use a scoring system and assign points based on different answers. The scoring category, what you can do is sometimes it's not helpful to just have one total number. Sometimes you want to see how that number breaks down. So this allows you to create categories, and you can create new categories. Right now, demographics is the only one that's loaded, but you can create new categories, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But you can assign this question to a category. So let's say one of my categories was legal attitudes and experiences. I could create that category, assign this question to the category, and then when I track points, what I'll see is I'll see a total score, but then I'll see the points just in legal experiences and attitudes. So it allows you to see the breakdown. Maybe you have legal experiences and attitudes as one category. Maybe it's a product liability case, and one of your other categories is experiences with products. Maybe another category is attitudes towards corporations. So you can create different categories that allow you to see where the distribution of points is in terms of the topics that you're asking about. And then your last option here is show notes. You can click this, and what that means is not only will you have the yes/no option to click a button for whether the response was yes or no, but then you can add some notes to the side of whatever you click. So maybe they raise their hand that yes, they've been a plaintiff in the lawsuit, and I ask them as the attorney, I say, well, tell me a little bit more about the case you were involved in. And they start talking and give me all sorts of details. What I can do is I can enter those details into the notes field. So that's the question I've created. I'm going to click Save. Are you sure you want to save this question? Yes. I'm going to save the question, and then you'll see it automatically adds it. It's the next question after the ones that are already in there. So I'm going to go ahead and add one more question before we move on and show the rest of the program, just to show you the examples of the different types of questions that you can add. So if I go up here and I click Add Question again, this time I like to use Likert scale questions for agree, disagree. So I'm going to select that option. And I'll show you what that means in just a second. So I want to create a statement that I'm going to ask jurors to agree or disagree with. So let's just say my statement is large corporations always put profits over public safety. That's my attitude statement. I can assign a category. I haven't created one for large corporations yet. I'll go back and do that. So I'll leave that blank for now, knowing I can come back and change the category. And I'll show the notes on this. Show the notes field. So if I do any follow-up for people who agree with this, I can add some text about why they said that. So I save the question, confirm that I want to save the question, and as you see, I can scroll down, and my question's there. Now, you'll see a little plus symbol over here. That shows you your scoring categories, and so it's just kind of a quick way to get it. So I can assign the previous one, have you ever been a plaintiff in a lawsuit? I'm going to call that a legal one. I haven't created a category for the large corporations, so I'm going to go ahead and come up here and do that. So I'm going to click new category, and let's just say corporate attitudes is what I'm going to call it. I click save. It's asking me to confirm, so I click OK, and I scroll down. Now I can hit this drop-down box and select corporate attitudes. So now I've assigned this question to a scoring category. But now what I want to do on these questions is I've decided I want to use the scoring category. I've decided I want to assign points to the answer. But what I haven't done in either of these is actually assign the points that I want to give to particular answers. So I'm going to start with my question. Have you ever been a plaintiff in a lawsuit? So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click the little pencil looking thing to edit. And what I'm going to do is it says question template, and you'll see a little pencil up by the answers. So I click that. And what you see is it brings up the answers. So it has the type of question. It has the question text for will load into this. And then what I can do is I can assign how many points if the answer is yes. Let's say I'm a defendant and I want to I'm using a golf-like score where more points is bad for me. And so if I want to assign points if they answer yes. So let's say I'll assign them 3 points if they answer yes. I'm not worried about anybody who has never been a plaintiff in the lawsuit, so I'm going to leave that at 0. And I click save, click OK to confirm. And it has now assigned the points to the answers. Now, in addition to all of the preloaded question template options, I can also come up here and add my own question template, meaning let's say I don't want to use the yes-no response format or the strongly agree, disagree answer format. Let's say I want to create my own new answer format. I go here, and what I do is these are the pre-existing ones. I don't want to mess with those. Instead, I want to add a new question type. So up here, I have a choice. Is it a single choice, a multiple choice, or a tabular multi-part? If it's single choice or multiple choice, I click that, and I create a name for this template, for this type of answer format. I create, I can add my question in there, and then selection type. Is it a single selection or multiple selection? So what that means is single selection would be something like yes, no format is single selection because it's only going to be one answer. It's either going to be yes or no. A multiple selection would be like check boxes. So maybe my question is, has anybody had any of the following experiences? And I list off 5. I could just add those 5 here, and I can check as many as I needed to. So I would choose the multiple selection option if I wanted to have that kind of format for my answer. So I'm going to close out of here because I'm not actually going to create a new answer type because I don't need it, but that shows you what you can do there. So I'm going to close out, but I'm also going to show you add question template. Let's talk about this tabular multi-part. That may sound a little weird. What that allows you to do is sometimes, for example, if you have a juror questionnaire that's going to be filled out, sometimes you'll have a section where you have what's labeled as question 7, but then question 7 has several subpoints, A through D, and each subpoint is basically another question. So let's say question 7 is, have you had any of the following experiences? And then, it says 7A through 7D, and it's just each A, B, C, D is a different experience. So it basically creates a grid when those types of grids exist. It's mainly to mimic questionnaires where that occurs. So that's what that means by the tabular multi-part question option. But again, I don't need to do that here, so I'm going to go ahead and click this X to close out. I'm going to close out here. And the last thing I want to show in this section where you create your questionnaire is I've created individual questions, but you can also create group questions. And this is a really cool feature that I think you'll really appreciate when we get to the screen, our courtroom screen, which is the screen we use when we're actually in the courtroom and enter the juror data. So group question, this is what I typically put here is voir dire questions that are for the entire group. So let me go ahead and add a question. Let's say one of the most common questions that I ask, an attitude question, if I'm a defendant in a civil case, is I'm concerned about people who believe that just because the case made it all the way to trial, that there must be some merit to the claims that the plaintiff's making. So jurors who are going to assume that just because it made it all the way to trial, there must be merit to the plaintiff's claims. So what I'm going to do, this is a new question, so I'm going to enter that. I'm just going to use shorthand here. So believe if a case makes it to trial, must have merit. Okay. The response, what response, when I click check the box, does a check in the box mean the response was yes or no? Here, I want to track. Here, I'm concerned about people who say yes, they do agree with this, so I'm going to select yes. And then, how many points do I want to assign if the response is yes? Let's say I just want to assign 3. So, click Save and Close, click OK, and now you can see I've created my group question. This is going to be really cool to have these group questions, because what the courtroom interface, the screen where you actually track the data in court in jury selection, allows you to do is you can just pull up a question, and then it has a checkbox for every juror in the pool, and as they're raising their hand, you can just go check the boxes, and every time you check one of those boxes, since we indicated when we created this that the response is going to be yes, so if I check the box, that means they responded yes. So let me show you what I mean by that here in just a minute. So I've created a group question. Obviously, I'm going to have more than one. I'm going to have a bunch in here, but I think that shows you the basics of how to create the questions in here. So I've added my voir dire question that I'm going to ask to the entire venire, to the big group of jurors. And let's say at this point, I'm happy with all the questions I entered, and I now have, this is going to be my strategy at trial. Obviously, in the real world, there would be a lot more questions under group questions. There would probably be some individual questions, the additional ones that I would add. But let's say those are our questions for now. Once you feel pretty good about the template, you're going to go up, and the next thing you're going to do is create the courtroom layout. And again, I'm not going to use the tutorial here, but what the courtroom layout does is it designs the screen that you're going to see when you load up the JuryLens program on the day of jury selection in the courtroom. So it creates the design on screen, how you want everything to be oriented. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In this sample case that we're using, if you recall, way back at the beginning, we said that there were going to be 15 total jurors in the box, in the jury box. There are 12 jurors, 3 alternates, so there's 15 total. So what I can do is I can visually create on the screen my jury box. So let's say that where I'm sitting in the courtroom is going to be basically here. Let's say the judge's bench is up here and the jury box is over here. So I'm going to create my jury box. So what I'm going to do is, how many columns are in this jury box? And the columns and rows basically create cells, if you're familiar with Excel, and each cell is the jury seat. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to do 2 columns, and I'm going to do, I ultimately want 15, but this is asked me for an even number. So I'm going to, it's because I have 2 columns, it's going to give me an even number because it's 2 columns times how many ever rows. So 2 columns, 8 rows. What number I want to start this group with. So this is the first group I'm going to add to the screen. So it'll start with juror number 1. And then this asks you, where does juror number 1 sit? So if we're going to create a column, this would be the top of the column. Is juror number 1 at the top left of the column, top right of the column, bottom right of the column, bottom left of the column, and then which way are the numbers going to go? Are they going to go sideways, meaning 1, 2, or are they going to go vertical, meaning 1, 2, in terms of the seat order? So let's say my juror is going to be up front in the right-hand corner, and I'll show you what I mean by this because I know it's a little confusing there. I click New Seating Group, and it adds it for me. So I'm going to call this the jury box. And what you'll see is, if you remember, I wanted juror number 1 in the upper right-hand corner. If you see, juror number 1 now is in the upper right-hand corner. I wanted the numbers to go vertically. So 1, 2, and if you can see that, they go vertically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I would have done it horizontally, it would have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So that's what you can do there. Now, I only have, if you recall, since I had 2 columns and 8 rows, it threw 16 in here, but I don't have 16 in my jury box. I have 15. So all I do is I go down to seat 16, click the X in the box, and now it's removed. Now I have the 15 in there. I'm going to move it up over here like this, so it's in the upper left-hand corner. Remember, my perspective is I'm sitting here, and so if I'm looking at the judge's bench, the jury box is to the left of me. That's the jury box. Now what I want to do is I want to create the rest of the venire, the galley. So let's say this is a typical state courtroom, and I have the jury box. I'm sitting at the attorney tables. They're somewhere over here. The galley is probably somewhere behind me. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to create a new seating group. This time, I need to know how many jurors I need in it. So I had 75 total jurors. You can see that over here. That's what I entered at the beginning. I've already added the first 15, so that means there's 60 more seats I have to create. So let's say this, you can modify this, but let's say that the galley's sitting in rows back here. So I'm going to create a row. So I'm going to go ahead and click this because the number is going to go sideways. And let's say there's 10 jurors in each row. So the row, so I'm going to have 10 columns, and since there would be 6 rows, right? So it's 10 columns. So the column is going to be each cell going across, so 10 going across, and then going down are going to be 6 rows. So that gives me 60 jurors. Let's say that this time the next number to pick up is 16, so I can start at 16. I could start at a different number as long as it's not a number that already exists, but I'm going to start with 16. But let's say this time 16 is basically going to sit closest to the jury box, and then the numbers are going to go horizontally to the right. So I want to move 16. It says 1 there, but that basically means the next number in the box that you're creating. So I'm going to put 16 over there. It goes horizontally, and then click New Seating Group. And what you can see there is now it gives me my seating group. I'm going to call this the galley. And so you'll see there's 10 seats across, 16. I wanted to start over here on the left. And then I wanted the numbers to go horizontally across. So you go 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. And then next row, I have 6 rows, I have 10 columns. That gives me 75 total. So I've labeled this the galley. I'm going to move this down. Maybe visually there's a couple ways you could do it. It's really your preference. You get total design control here. Maybe I want it to look just like from my perspective. So I'm going to move it down the screen because I'm going to be sitting here. And I just want the layout to be oriented that way. And you just use a scroll bar to get down to it. Let's say I don't want to, they are behind me, but I just don't want to deal with any scrolling at all. I can just move it up, and then I can just, visually remember. Maybe I put it down here to help me visually remember. Over here's the jury box, over here's the galley. So I've created my courtroom layout. If I'm happy with that, what I do is I'm going to come over and click Save Courtroom Layout and continue, and that's going to take me to the screen that I'm going to use on the day of jury selection when I'm tracking all the data. So let's take a look at what happens here. Ask me if I'm sure, as usual. And it creates my courtroom layout. As you can see, we have the jury box over here. We have the galley over here. Now, there's a lot going on this screen, which is a good thing. And you don't have to use everything, but let me show you some things that we had already decided that you can see how they played out. First, you'll notice there's several boxes with yellow around them. The entire jury box, and then jurors 16 through 23. Here's what the yellow represents: who is in play. If you recall, at the beginning of the program, we had to enter the total jurors in the box. So we have 12 plus 3 alternates, and then how many peremptory strikes each side had. And if you recall, we entered that the plaintiff has 4 and the defendant has 4, so 8 total. So if you notice, the yellow is the 15 plus the 8. So right now, if there's no hardships, there's no cause. If we're going straight to peremptories, 23, if everybody uses all of their peremptories, 23 would be the last juror in the box. So what that allows me to do is the yellow will tell me the rest of these people I don't need to be that worried about. Now, if it's the middle of voir dire and more, there's potentially more cause challenges coming up, I'm not going to ignore everybody. I'll probably, I rarely ignore everybody, but maybe even though the yellow only goes to 23, maybe I'm going to pay close attention to 35 just to give myself some room in case that number changes, somebody leaves for cause or whatever it may be. The reality is, if I'm personally doing this, I'm going to track all these, but that just gives you a sense of what you can do. Now, the other interesting thing is, if you recall, in this one, we had the situation where the judge picked the alternate seats in advance, and we entered those in the first screen. And we can see here is seat 3, A1, so that's the first alternate. Seat 2, or seat 8 is A2, and seat 13 is A3. So you have a visual reminder of who your alternates are, which can be really helpful. Because sometimes I don't have as many peremptory strikes as I think I need, and so maybe my thought process is, if there's somebody I don't like in seat 13, I'm not going to worry as much about them because they're the third alternate, and I have to use that strike somewhere else much more important. That's much more important. So it just gives you visual cues of where everything is that, again, lets you track all this information. So you have a pretty cool layout up there. So now if we come over here, you can see a few options. Up here will give you a summary of the juror, summary notes. I'll show you group questions in just a second. And then if you remember, we created, page 1 had questions on it. Those are all the questions that we entered, first name, last name, so blah, blah, blah. Page 2, we had other questions. You can scroll down and see where we entered a couple. Have you ever been a plaintiff in a lawsuit? Large corporations always put profits over safety. And then we have our group questions. So let me show you how we enter information. So let's say we get a bunch of short forms before jury selection begins, or we get some sort of document that lists all the jurors' names. So we know, 1 through 75 what their names are. I want to enter that information, so I come over and I just double click on juror number 1, and I can enter their name. So I'm going to enter Joe. Last name is Jackson. I know Joe is a male. I can enter, let's say Joe is 65. Let's say Joe is white. And I can go on and on. So I can enter all that information. I can go to page 2. Joe has been a plaintiff in a lawsuit, so I'm going to click yes. Joe strongly agrees that large corporations always put profits over safety, so I'm going to click that. So I can enter it individually there. I've entered my information, so I'm going to close out the screen. And what you'll see now is if I click on juror number 1, now you see Joe, his name's up there, his information is populated over here, so I get kind of a quick view. You see all his information over here. I get a quick view, and I can also edit it as I go along. So let's say, I thought he said he was 65. It turns out he's 63. I can just double click over here and change it sort of on a quick change over here. So I entered 63. Close that up. Now it says 63. So you have the big screen you can pull up to enter. I use the big screen being if you double click. I use this a lot if I'm going through completed juror questionnaires. It's just easy because it's all the individual responses. More often in court, I'll just kind of quickly enter the information over here because it's a little more quicker to do so. Now there's some other cool things. You can keep summary notes up here. So if there's big picture notes that you just want to have in front of you about Joe, you can enter those. You can add a picture of Joe. If let's say you pulled some pictures offline, found some pictures on social media, you can add a picture as a visual cue to remind you who Joe was. Let's say Joe's claimed a hardship. I can come over here and click hardship. And look what happens. There's an H that appears here. So I have visually, I can see everybody with an H, every box seat with an H is somebody who's claimed a hardship. Let's say I can also add red flags. So if I click red flag, now we have a red flag there. I can use the red flag to track whatever I want. Maybe for me, a red flag means they said something that's pretty alarming. And I want to make sure I remember that when I'm looking at the entire veneer. Maybe they said something during the other side's voir dire, and I want to make sure I follow up with them. I check that. And a question mark signifies that's somebody I wanted to follow up with. Let's say I've decided this juror is somebody I want to strike. So click that, and it gives me the red box with the S. So there's all sorts of visual cues you can actually create in the juror seat. Now, one other cool thing here is that a lot of attorneys and jury consultants will color code their jurors to help them track it. The most common one I've seen is jurors who are bad for one side are colored red, and good jurors are colored green, and maybe uncertain jurors are colored yellow. The program allows you to do that. So if we're dealing with Joe Jackson, we've decided he's a problem for us. I come over here and you see it says color. I click on that, gives me a drop-down box, and I can select my color. Let's say for this one, for whatever reason, I decide Joe's good for me. So I can click that, give Joe a green color, and I can go through each of these boxes and color them. As you saw in the drop-down box, there's all sorts of different colors you can use. You don't have to use red, yellow, or green. There's other color options. So you can use that however you want. So pretty interesting there. Now, one of the other things, if you recall, we created a group question when we created our question template. And that was the question that we're going to ask to everybody in the veneer at one time. So let's look at how you do that. What you do is you come down, you click group question right here, and it pulls up a screen. I go to the question I want. If you recall, the question I entered was people who believe if a case makes it all the way to trial, it must have merit. And my response I put was yes, meaning when I check somebody, that means they clicked yes. And that's the score. I had pre-assigned 3 points if they click yes. And I can change that here. So I asked my question. I keep the screen up. And what we do is as jurors raise their hand, I check their box. Okay, juror number 6, you said yes. Juror number 10 said yes. Juror 13 has said yes. Juror 20 said yes. Juror 34 said yes. Juror 48 said yes. Juror 61 said yes. So I can go through and just quickly identify everybody who answered affirmatively to that question. So again, it's really what this is about is efficiency. It gives you a quick way to track all that information rather than scrambling to different parts of the program to have to enter it for each juror or whatever it may be. Let's say, you're in voir dire. And if I would have added more questions, which I can do, let's say I'm in the courtroom and I decide the other side asked something and I want to add a new question that I hadn't previously programmed. I just click new question and I can enter a new question. So let's say, my question now is, believes large corporations act unethically. So I can enter that on the fly. My response is if anybody who I check says yes, and let's say that's worth 5 points. And now I can enter it. So you can do that on the fly. Now let me show you a few other things that you can do in this program. If you look across the top, you'll see excuse jurors. I'm going to show you what I can do there. I'm going to go ahead and excuse number 2. So I'm going to click number 2, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click excuse. I can add a note. Let's just say cause, and I hit enter, and then 2's box goes gray. So 2's gone. So if let's say I accidentally excuse a juror that shouldn't have been excused, and that juror or that juror comes back for whatever reason, I can go click on excuse jurors. It shows me juror number 2. I can unexcuse 2, and that's seat number 2. I can send them to whatever seat I want, but I'm going to keep them in seat 2. Unexcused to 2. Are you sure? Hit OK. And close out. And now you'll see juror number 2 is back in the box. So if you accidentally excuse somebody, there's a way to deal with that. But I'm going to go ahead and excuse juror number 2 again. Click excuse. Click cause, because I want to show you another function here. So I've entered cause. Now let's say, because juror 2 has been excused, juror 16 is now going to step into 2's box. So what I do here is I click 16, and I want to go up and I want to use this move to. So I'm going to move 16 to seat 2. I can only move 16 to open seats. That's why these other options are grayed out. They only become options once that seat's empty. So 2 is the only empty seat. So I'll click 2, click move to, confirm OK. And what you'll see is now juror 16 is over here, and if I had entered a name and all that, or a color and all that, I would have seen that. So let me just show you another example. If I click on 17, 17's name is Tim, last name is Jones. Tim Jones is a male. Tim Jones, we'll just use that information. Let's say Tim Jones is a yellow juror. I'm not so certain. So let's say now juror 3, who was an alternate, but juror 3 gets excused. So excuse juror number 3. Let's say this one was a hardship, so I'm going to enter hardship. Juror 3 is gone. Now 3's information is gone, but you see it keeps the alternate, so I still know that's the alternate seat. Now 17 is going to step into 3. So into the seat number 3. So I go to click on 17. I want to move 17, 3 to seat 3. So pick the seat, then click move to. Yes, I'm sure. And you'll see now it says 17 took the color of the juror with them. And if I click on 17, you'll see it took all the information with them. So you can move jurors around, which gives a lot of versatility to the program. Now another feature up here is you'll see there's a timer in this program, and what that's for is obviously you can use a timer for anything, but often judges will put time limits on how long each side can ask questions. So let's say the judge says each side gets 30 minutes of voir dire, and you want to keep track of your time while you're using this program. All you have to do is go up here and click start time, and you'll see it tracks the time for you. So you'll always see how much time you've used. You can pause it. You can stop. So let's say you've raised a cause challenge, and now the other side is taking a minute to voir dire and try to rehabilitate the juror, which maybe doesn't count towards your time, so you want to pause. So you pause. The other side gets done, gets back to you. Just click start again, and the timer will pick up. If you want to stop and you want to restart it, just come over here. It says reset timer, and it'll reset it for you. So pretty simple and straightforward. So there's all sorts of different things you can do here. I mentioned earlier, it'll track your strike candidates. So let's say juror 17, you decide is strike worthy. So not only does it put the S in the box so you can visually see it, but it tracks it up here so you can see it as well. 17, just so you have all your strikes numbers in one place. So just another way to kind of quickly and efficiently track this information. Keep it in places where it's quickly and easily accessible. So that gives you, I think, a basic sense of how to use the courtroom data entry part of this program. So here's an example of what our screen looks like when we have all of our information entered in. We'll have all our information about the individual jurors over here, and because I've used a color coding system, I can now see the distribution of my panel. And this is where I think the color coding can be really helpful, because when I look at this, I can just see, if you recall, the reds indicate my dangers, the people I'm worried about. I can see where in the pool they are. I can see, okay, I have 4 in the box. 2 of them are alternates, so maybe that factors into how I look at this. And I can see where they are in the veneer. So, as I get maybe to the 40s, I start to see, I got a decent run of a handful of red jurors. So it just gives me a big global picture of the jury pool. I can see, obviously, with the yellow, which indicates the jurors are in play. We've struck 2 jurors, so you can see before it went to 23, now it automatically adjusted and goes to 25. I have all my H's for jurors in the veneer who said they have hardships. I have flags for things that I want to flag to myself. I have question marks for the jurors that I know I want to do follow-up on. I have the S box, which means strike, the jurors that I've decided I'm going to strike. I have the C box, which are the jurors that I think there's a cause challenge. So visually, it just tracks all this information that allows you to quickly see what's going on, and you can click on any juror seat, and it will automatically load their information up here, so you can kind of quickly see on an individual level what's going on in more detail. So that gives you, I think, a pretty good sense of how this program works and what it can do for you. Again, this was designed to make the jury selection process much more efficient and much more effective, and I think this program is a big step in that direction.